SAA pilots look set to go to strike from Thursday, threatening to disrupt travel plans of many holidaymakers. Protracted wage negotiations between the airline and the pilots failed to produce an agreement. The airline says its management is doing everything possible to avoid a strike or any disruptions to its operations, especially during the December peak season. The South African Airways Pilots Association, SAPA, is demanding an increase of 15.7%, while SAA is offering 8.4%. The airline says ascending to the pilots' wage increase demand will trigger SAA's decline into bankruptcy. SAA, however, says it's implementing contingency measures to ensure any disruptions that may occur should parties fail to reach an agreement and the strike goes ahead. Let's speak now to aviation expert Guy Leitch for more. Guy, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. With the peak travel season around the corner, SAA pilots are striking. What's to be made of the timing of such a move?
Yeah, hi, nice to be with you, Paul. Well, when I speak to the pilots, they insist that it's not actually specifically set out to disrupt the holiday season. It's just a natural consequence of an extremely long, drawn-out process, which actually began 2 years ago, but which really began in earnest 9 months ago. And then they got to an impasse in September already, but now they finally decided that they have run out of options and there's no option but to strike from 7 o'clock tomorrow.
We know that SAA recently reported a modest profit, but can the airline be seen as financially robust? I mean, the demands have been put on the table, but can the airline afford it?
That's the million-dollar question. I'm afraid I don't know the answer to it because the airline hasn't produced audited financial results for 6 or 7 years now. And even the results that it claimed to have made a 256 million rand profit in were actually the results from the financial year ended 2023, which is of 18 months ago. We don't know how the airline's doing this year. I am, however, inclined to believe the assurances of Professor John Namola, the interim CEO, who says that it is operating, if not profitably, at least sustainably, and indeed sort of asking around for what the load factors are of the flights would seem to, and the ticket prices that they're getting would seem to support that notion. So I think that the airline is operating sustainably, and therefore it can afford an increase in the pilots. There are only 148 pilots. 7 or 8 years ago, there were nearly 800 pilots. So it's a much smaller pilot body at this stage.
The lucrative benefits that the SAA pilots have historically enjoyed, I mean, as we try and get a better sense of affordability and some of the demands that are being put on the table, what are the pilots saying about, some of the reasoning behind the call and the strike action and why they feel that it needs to be implemented so that they can get what they're putting on the table?
Yeah, 100%. Well, the pilots, in fact, are often to be heard saying that it's not about the money. It is obviously largely about the money. But what happened when the airline went into business rescue was that the pilot salaries were cut by about 50%, whereas the rest of the staff salaries were cut by 10%. So the pilots were really hammered back. And they're looking to make up some of that lost ground, which is why they were asking for that 30% increase. It's not just the actual pay that's of concern. The pilots are arguing that they're being overworked as well. In fact, a lot of them are now already at the maximum allowable flying time limit allowed by the Civil Aviation Authority. So they're not even going to be able to fly in December anyway because they've reached their maximum time limit of 1,000 hours a year. So, and they're saying that they're having to do much more additional simulated time and other time as well. So they're being paid a lot less and being expected to work a lot more. And I think that the real problem that the airline has to face is whether it's going to have a problem retaining pilots. Already we've seen a lot of the newly promoted captains heading off to much better paid pastures with a lot less work.
We understand the airline is also implementing contingency measures to ensure that the disruption will be as minimal as possible. What could such contingency measures look like?
Yeah, I'm not convinced that the contingency measures are going to amount to much. There are two alternatives, or there are two options that they have, which they will obviously use both. The first is that they do have management pilots who have to stay on the job because they are officially post holders for the Civil Aviation Authority. So they will be available to fly. They'll do less management, more flying. And the other is that the 4 Boeing 737s that have been wet leased from Sun Express in Turkey have all arrived now. So they'll be able to do a lot of the heavy lifting for the domestic routes. But long-haul routes and the regional routes, I think that passengers are not going to be able to fly for the foreseeable future.
And what kind of impact could that on its own have on the airline?
But it's huge. You know, airlines pride themselves on their ability to be on time to the nearest minute or so and get their passengers to their destinations. Obviously, a pilot strike is an incredibly serious event. It's not just SAA. I mean, it happens to all airlines around the world. But, you know, it does really threaten the airline's existence, and it's absolutely imperative that they come to an agreement sooner rather than later.
With the threat to the airline's existence, how much room does it leave for other airlines to benefit from SAA's, downfall or whatever? I'm battling to find the word, but how does SAA give room for other airlines to benefit?
Well, the moment SAA pilots go on strike, obviously those who have to travel will be forced to move to the other airlines.
Yeah.
The problem we have right now is that the other airlines are short of seating capacity already. And that is one of the reasons why we are seeing these huge seat prices, which you may have seen are in fact now, the Parliament is now threatening an investigation into why airfares are so expensive. And it will put up these already expensive airfares far more if the sudden demand is switched across from SAA to, for instance, SAF Air or Lyft or Airlink and Semair. So it'll put up prices enormously, but a lot of people will just not be able to fly, quite simply because there's just not enough aircraft available right now.
Yeah, harsh reality. Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening.